Good morning and welcome to the Point. We're happy to have on the program this morning a person with a name that will be familiar to you. And when we talk about all that she's done, you'll find out she's been around politics for a long time. Ronna Romney McDaniel is here. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Congratulations on being elected the chairman of the Michigan Republican Party. It's not necessarily a big step when you consider how long you've been involved and your family's involvement. But before we get to that, talk to me a little bit about how this came about, because I was, at least as an observer, a little surprised when Bobby Shostak said he wasn't going to run for the chairmanship again. How did that hit you?
Well, of course, Bobby's done a great job chairing our party. We had great success in this last cycle. He was chair for 4 years and finance director for 2 years before, and I think he thought, you know, it's time for me to try something new. And at that time, I decided to look at it. I traveled the state as national committee woman. I knew our grassroots well. I'm familiar with our donors, and it looked like a time that would be great for me to jump into this position heading into a presidential year where we most likely will face Hillary Clinton, and certainly something that I'm looking forward to, bringing our message to Michigan as to why a Republican is better suited to take the White House.
I certainly want to talk to you about 2016, but let's go back a little bit. I was doing some calculation. I believe within your largely immediate family, there are 4 runs for the United States Senate, 2 by your mom, 1 by your uncle, 1 by your grandmother.
Yes.
Your grandfather was the governor of the state. Your father ran for attorney general for a short period of time before they got to the convention. And all of that, with your mom running for Senate, that's that part of it. I guess I should point out your uncle also ran for president. But you have been involved in party politics for a long time. Tell me about some of the positions you've held.
Well, as a young child, I was involved. Of course, we were a family that was always active politically, and I remember being on the Headley campaign. My mom was going in and doing finance, and I was a little girl just eating donuts and loving it. And then as I've come to Michigan, stayed involved, served as a precinct delegate on the state committee, as national committee woman. I chaired the Women for MIT Coalition. Just always been concerned and active, and then now I have this great opportunity to serve as the state party chair.
Talk to me what it means to you, state party chair, because I think people sometimes miss the all-encompassing nature of it. I mean, a lot of it's fundraising. Let's face it, you got to raise a ton of money. And that was one of the places where Bobby Shostak, because he was finance chair and carried that forward, certainly helped the party, one of the areas. But beyond that, there is a lot of day-to-day work. I mean, you're bugged by pesky reporters like me, but there really is a lot to be done that people don't see. It's a lot of stuff that's done behind the scenes.
Well, it's a huge organization. We have a mission. Certainly in 2016, Michigan's going to be a battleground state for the presidential race. So we have to, right now, be putting our grassroots organization together, getting our volunteers energized, putting field operations together, and of course, raise the funds to help our candidates and to get our message out, because we have a good message for Michigan. We've told a great story here in the past 4 years with Governor Snyder and what he's done, and we want to show Michiganders that we can continue that comeback and that turnaround and take it even to the White House.
Republicans in 2012, where your uncle was the ultimate nominee, appeared to have a candidate of the week. It was everybody from Michelle Bachmann to Herman Cain to Newt Gingrich to Rick Santorum to Rick Perry. I mean, there was somebody different all the way along the line. Obviously, Mitt Romney, who many believed would be the nominee, was the nominee. Are Republicans setting themselves up for that again, because you're starting to see what is likely to be a pretty crowded field? And there are a lot of factions within the big tent, as you like to refer to it, as the Republican Party. Are we in one of those kind of things where this is going to be a very unsettled field at the same time, while Democrats, at least for now, appear to be early on settled on a candidate?
Well, we've learned some lessons from 2012. And with that field, we had 23 debates. Our convention was later in the cycle, so it made it hard for the nominee, Mitt, to access those general election dollars and being competitive and getting his message out. So things that the RNC has done and to help our candidate have the best results is we've limited the number of debates. Even though there will be a great field of candidates, there will only be 9 debates sanctioned by the RNC with some pretty severe penalties if anybody steps outside of that. And then we've moved up our convention date to July. all those changes are going to give our candidate the best opportunity to contrast our message with the failing Obama policies, and I include Hillary Clinton in that, and give us the best opportunity to get out across the country and talk about what we can do when we're in the White House.
When you look at that big field and you talk about limiting that, moving up the convention, that still doesn't take away from the fact that you start off with Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina, and each one of those offers an opportunity for a candidate to kind of be a breakaway candidate, even if in the debates or whatever. So are you concerned that you're still, that you give each Republican candidate the opportunity to beat up on the ultimate nominee, not predicting who that is, but I mean, obviously you can do some damage in primaries.
Well, we have such a great field of candidates. I do think it's good for all the voters to see them in these primaries, give that opportunity. You know, we're only going to have 4 primaries in February, so that will give a long time for people to get to know each candidate. And then I think in March, we'll have 20 or so primaries in March 1st. So I think the field will narrow. There'll be circumstances that will force it to narrow, like money and finances and momentum. It's kind of its own being once it starts off, and you can't really predict where it's going to end, but it's fun to watch. My goal as state party chair is to get them all to Michigan. We want them in our state. We want them in front of our voters so that we get to know them and make the best choice as to who we think should represent our party.
Well, I would point out to you that I've got a lot of room in the studio, so if you want to do one of those debates here, we would be happy to host it.
We'd love them to come over here, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about Michigan's primary, because obviously with it falling a little bit later, we don't know exactly who will still be in the running. What's the date?
It's March 8th. Okay. That was set legislatively, I'd say about a month ago, right. A little less than that. And you know, when Mitt went against Santorum last cycle, it was later than that, and primaries had started in January. Right. So we could very well, I think we will very well be an important state in the primary process. There's not many other states that are going to be on that date, so it'll make us a centerpiece for that primary date. I'm very excited. I think we'll have a lot of candidates in our state talking about their message.
Is that the same date as Ohio? Are they doing theirs on that date?
I don't think Ohio's set, but they may be looking at March 8th as well.
Because there is always the question of who comes here, and we've seen this over the years. Democrats certainly had their problems with their caucuses back in 2008, and we don't, sometimes it's unsure to see, but Michigan has always been the place that people have considered, particularly in years past, a kind of must-win, certainly a must-win for Democrats. But as you well know, it's been since 1988 since Republicans have been able to close the deal for their general election. So what do you have to do as a party chairman to break that trend that has really, even at this time, we've had Republican governors and Democratic governors and Republican members of the House that have dominated for most of that period of time, and the State House and the State Senate, but the presidential candidates have not fared well in Michigan for Republicans.
Well, certainly we have to build the organization and get our grassroots ready and be ready to plug into whoever that nominee is. And then we need to tell our story. You know, what we've done in Michigan under the Snyder administration and with the House and the Senate to turn our state around, to bring 300,000 more jobs back to Michigan, to lower unemployment, and we contrast that to what Granholm was doing, we can say, you know what, Republican leadership is successful in our state, and we can take that to the White House. And there is a trend, you know, when a party has had the White House for 8 years, it's a good time to switch. We traditionally switch parties after that time, so it's an optimum time to tell our story with Michigan, and then talk about the failures of the Obama White House and what they have done and where they're not leading our country, and say, you know what, the leadership we have here is good, and it's the right type of leadership that we need leading our country. And I think we can get a nominee from Michigan and win and change that trend from 1988.
Your counterpart over at the Democratic Party, Lon Johnson, will say that they have a numerical advantage in just people that they believe are Democrats and that have Democratic voting propensities, and those people turn out in presidential election years. I'm not going to make you weigh in on the whole numbers thing, but as you look back and see, obviously Democrats do turn out more voters, or more people turn out to vote for Democrats in those presidential election years. How do you combat that trend?
Well, right now we start working and laying the groundwork to get our voters out, to get our message out, and that's something I'm prepared to do. I'm working hard to doing on every front, data-wise, getting good candidates, telling our message, and then being prepared. And we need a good nominee, and I think we're going to have that. And you know, Michigan's an important state. They can't overlook what's happened to Detroit and what Governor Snyder has done to take on tough issues and fix things and tackle them and not kick issues down the road. And when you look at that type of leadership and an ability to get in and actually take on difficult challenges, that is what we need in the White House right now. So if we tell our story and we put the organization together, we will get those voters to come out and vote Republican in November 2016.
Ronna Romney McDaniel is the chairman of the Michigan Republican Party. She's our guest this morning as we continue to talk about 2016, but I want to talk about the party in general. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we want to talk about the number of different ideas that reside within the Republican Party. If you walk over in the State House of Representatives, it's pretty apparent. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some other aspects, for example, the direction and so much more. All that comes right ahead when we come back to The Point. To The Point, Ronna Romney McDaniel is the newly elected chairman of the Michigan Republican Party. We talked about her background and family. If that name sounds familiar, it's because it is. It's been associated with Michigan politics for a very long time. Let's talk a little bit about this Republican Party, because if you say the Republican Party is, that next blank is kind of hard to fill in because it is a lot of different things. There's a big diversity of opinion when it comes just to Republicans. And we saw part of that in the lame duck session because there were some Republicans, and if we have time, we're going to talk about the road proposal, but there were some Republicans who said, we can fix roads this way. And there were other Republicans that said, we won't take it up. And so we ended up with kind of this hybrid. As I say, we'll try to get to that. But how difficult is it to keep factions, sometimes that have very broad differences of opinion within the party, to get them all to kind of to row in the same direction?
Well, certainly what I've been saying as I ran for this position and traveled the state is, you know, let our purpose unify us. We have a purpose of what we need to accomplish in the next 2 years. And we all agree, even though there are a lot of different voices within our party, I think every one of us will agree that we don't want Hillary Clinton to be our next president, that Obama has led us down the wrong road and is not leading our country well, that we need to turn things around. So if we let our purpose unify us and we work together towards that common goal of getting the White House back, but also keeping our Republican leadership in Michigan, which is all important to the turnaround that we're all experiencing on a personal level. Our families are doing better, our jobs are better, our incomes are up, our houses are going up in price again. All these things that we've seen under Republican leadership, if we talk about those things and think about how important it is to keep those factors in place for the growth of our state, that purpose unifies us and we can come together. And yes, there's going to be different opinions and viewpoints, and we're going to have a dialogue, which is healthy. It's going to make the laws better. It's going to make us govern better. So as long as we come together in the end and know what the ultimate goal is, and that we want Republicans in leadership positions because they do the best at governing and bringing opportunity to the people of Michigan and ultimately to the White House so that they can help our country. That's how we bring these factions together.
I want to come back to Michigan in a moment. Let's go to Washington for just a moment.
Yes.
This past week, the Republican-led House of Representatives passed a budget for the Department of Homeland Security. That budget, implicit in that, is also funding for executive orders that the president has signed that are very controversial about allowing people to stay in this country and work without getting full citizenship. And without getting too far into the weeds about the issue, I bring it up because that was the thing this week that generated the most negative email from many of the more conservative members in your party, emailing saying, how dare those Republicans? And there were 75 of them, and they listed their names, and there were a bunch of them from right here in Michigan. Here in the West Side, we're kind of split. A couple of didn't, a couple did. But the question is, if that issue has Republicans divided, how difficult is it for you to pull them together? Because when it comes to immigration, that's a pretty big issue for Republicans.
Well, it's a huge issue, and of course that's in Washington, and we want our Department of Homeland Security funded, and we're going to have a dialogue within our party. And what I think it speaks to is the lack of leadership in the White House again. You know, President Obama ran and said, I'm going to work with the parties, I'm going to bring people together, and we've had so much dissension in Washington, and I think it starts with the leader. It starts with the person who said, I want to be the president, I'm going to bring people together, and he has just chosen not to work with Republicans. He has chosen not to lead, and we're seeing that in our nation's capital, and it's unfortunate, and it's affecting our country. What we have in Lansing is leadership that is tackling tough issues and getting things done and turning a state around. So yeah, we're going to have differences of opinion. And as party chair, I don't set the policy, but I will say, based on our record here in Michigan and what Republicans have done, we have a record that has shown that we have the right governing principles to get Michigan turned around, coming back from what the path Granholm set us along, and turn people's family lives around and increase their ability to earn incomes, have jobs, have their homes, all the things you want in your daily life. And we're the party that has done that.
When you look at the state of Michigan, there are a lot of factors, and Republicans will quickly say, look, things are better. We got a Republican governor and things have gotten better. Let's be clear. The other side will say, well, look, there were other factors out there. They will talk to the speak to the auto bailout and some of those things. And without getting, again, too deep into the weeds on that, when you talk about things that you believe as Republicans that have gone right, the current issue on the table is a May 5th ballot initiative that Republicans, again, are not unified behind. Just this week, Attorney General and candidate for governor, I would suggest, Bill Schuette, says he thought that this plan was full of potholes. The governor obviously had a different plan. The lame duck legislature came up with this plan. Republicans, this governor have quite a bit hanging on this idea of getting roads fixed. So there again, what do you do as a party chairman? Do you try to pull all those factions together or just let the chips fall where they may?
Well, once again, we have different voices on this issue, and ultimately it's going to come down to the voters, and they're going to have to decide. But the governor is concerned about the safety of Michigan citizens, and this is the proposition that's been put before him. And Bill Schuette obviously is not interested in raising taxes and takes issue. Again, but we're leading on tough issues, and we're putting something out there to fix a problem that we all agree is a huge issue for Michiganders. Anyone driving right now on the roads knows that they're not safe, that they need to be fixed. And how we get to that solution is going to be up to the voters on May 5th. But we are taking a leadership role and not kicking a problem down the road, which has been done far too often in our state, and trying to solve problems that will make business better to do in Michigan, make it safer for families to drive, make it better for companies to come in and look at us as an investment because our roads are safe. And so all of these things are issues that need to be addressed, and we're tackling them. We're going to have differences of opinion along the way, but we're never going to kick the can down the road. How
difficult is it as the chairman of a party? Because you said something interesting a minute ago. You said, look, you don't get to set policy. And in just thinking about that for a moment, that must be a little difficult because people, elected officials, must lobby you all of the time to see their point of view, I would guess.
Well, I'm not there yet. I've only been on the job 2 weeks.
Right.
But certainly we have principles as a party. We talk about limiting government, getting it out of the way, lowering taxes, increasing opportunity. We care about education. There are principles of our party that we're governed by. And as we talk about those things and we show them in action in our state, which we've put them into action, we have a great story to tell. But I'm not being lobbied right now to create policy. I'm being lobbied to...
Well, I meant to support, not create.
To support, not create, but to get our state in a position so we're a battleground state in 2016, and we keep the House and we keep Justice David Viviano on the Supreme Court. Those are the primary goals that we have for our party in 2016, and to grow our party, not just for that time frame, but beyond 2018 as well.
We've been talking a lot about some of those bigger issues and the national issues. Obviously, the presidential race will be of supreme importance. However, keeping control of the State House of Representatives becomes very important, particularly for Governor Rick Snyder. And those House seats, while Republicans enjoy a margin now, a lot of those House seats were won by relatively small margins. So what do you have to do, as you said earlier, something that I know that chairmen do, what do you have to do to find the right candidates in the case of Republicans who may be term limited or may decide to do something else, and or recruiting candidates in maybe other seats that you believe are winnable but you don't hold?
Well, right now we need to identify the seats that we think might be vulnerable in 2016, and work with the candidates that are already there, or start looking at the field and figure out ways that we're going to help support them in their races. Of course, there's going to be a primary. We're not going to get involved in the primaries, but once that nominee is selected by that community, we need to have the organization and the infrastructure ready to plug into them to help them be successful. And that'll be a number of different areas that we need to do that through mail or calls and knocking doors and that typical grassroots fashion of campaigning. But it is going to be a challenge in 2016. We have to keep the House. It's critical that we keep this comeback going in our state, and certainly a huge part of that is keeping our majority in the House, which is at a historic high right now.
You got the information earlier this week that Candice Miller, longtime Secretary of State, member of Congress, is not going to run for re-election. I was mildly surprised by that, but does that create, I assume there'll be a pretty healthy primary in that district, does that create one more added element on your list, given that the Miller seat would have been considered relatively safe, I believe?
Yeah, it is one more thing, and of course Candice is wonderful. I spoke with her on the phone yesterday, and she just said, it's just time for me to go and move on to other things. But we have a great field in that area, a great field of candidates. I plan on keeping that seat. We're going to put a plan together to keep that seat. I foresee that we will, but we're going to fight hard for it and make sure that it stays Republican.
If my math is right, Republicans have not been able to elect a United States Senator in the state since 1994, a little over 20 years. Now, the question is, because you know firsthand how difficult it is to try to run against an incumbent U.S. Senator. I mean, there are a few things in life that are sure deals, and in this last election cycle, we did see some incumbents that almost uncharacteristically were defeated. But it's a big job to do. Where does that rank on a priority list for Ronna, Romney, McDaniel trying to take one of those Senate seats, understanding you got to keep the House, you've got all of these other races you have to keep your eyes on, and there are, as always, there are limits on time and money.
Well, 2016, thankfully, we don't have a Senate seat up. So 2018 is going to be the next big Senate race, and we don't know if Senator Stabenow is going to run again, but we're not going to just give it to her. We're going to put a great candidate up, and certainly we want to turn the Senate in Michigan. We have the right message, and we've governed well. We're a red state in every other aspect except for those Senate seats. So we certainly will be looking at that and looking at candidates who will potentially run for that and helping put them in the best position.
If you were at the end of your tenure, if it's however many years, the end of your tenure as chairman of the Republican Party and not at the beginning, what would you hope that you could look back and say, we did this? What would a successful term as chairman look like?
Well, absolutely. I want to have a Republican be nominated or win in Michigan and turn our state red. I want to have that happen. And it hasn't happened since 1988. I think this is a great year to have that happen in 2016. And I'd love to have them win the White House through Michigan.
Is there, as you look out over the horizon, one never says never, although sometimes politicians can be a little coy, is there the opportunity to see somebody, at least with a hyphenated Romney name, on a ballot coming to us in the next few years?
Well, to be fair, my middle name's Romney, so there's no hyphen in there, but that's not even in my radar right now. Right now, I am so focused on this job. I'm so excited to work with our grassroots and talk about our message and get ready for 2016 and bring victory to our state and to our candidates and help them succeed at getting their message out and then serving the people of Michigan.
Ronna, Romney, McDaniel, thank you so much for coming in and doing this just a couple of weeks after taking this post. We'll have you back frequently as we do. Mr. Johnson from over at the Democrats, again, thank you for your time. We're back with more To the Point in just a moment. When it comes to winning Michigan in 2016, Republicans have their hands full because Democrats want to continue their string of winning since 1988. In the weeks to come, we'll be talking with Lon Johnson from the Michigan Democratic Party and keeping you up to date on that road ballot issue, all that and more every Sunday right here, 10 o'clock on Wood TV 8 for To the Point.